Hello everybody, welcome back. If you are new to the group, each week we present a word, and that word is designed as a guide to help in self-discovery, and it can be used for journaling, meditation, contemplation, and discussion. And this week, there's a little bit of construction going on in my neighborhood, so you might hear some noise. And this week our word is masturbation. So I'm looking at that word as a metaphorical representation of it. And metaphorical masturbation is something that Molly discussed, and it is the idea that when you're doing something that is kind of on your own, for you, pleasure-inducing, not really productive, that is very, very self-oriented, that is what we're talking about. So whether it is playing video games, scrolling through Instagram for 6 hours without liking or touching anything, or even if you do every once in a while, just that very useless kind of activity that you spend time on, that you gain pleasure from, but doesn't really produce anything, doesn't create a skill, doesn't create any kind of emotional or personal growth, that doesn't process anything, that is just stimulation. And the kind of time and space that we waste in our lives on that type of activity is really what we're looking at. So the self-examination this week is, how much time are you spending doing activities that do not further develop you, that do not build skills, that do not do things that help soothe and satisfy that need for quiet space and time, for personal development, and really there's something at the end of it. There's a relationship built with someone, there's something produced, there's a skill that is learned, but it's something that you're doing in your life that is furthering you. Anything that we're doing in our life that is not doing that, right? Anything that we're doing that's very isolated, that you're doing by yourself, that you're wasting time on, that you're spending a lot of time with, and not really going out into the world, not really growing and developing, but just doing that kind of self-pleasuring stuff, those kind of activities. That's what we're looking at. So in our lives, we have an opportunity every day. You're going to get into these kind of things. We all do. We all spend those moments, those hours participating in this kind of activity. And it's really just important to remember that that's what you're doing, to remember that very isolated, self-pleasuring kind of activity can create a life of loneliness, can create a life that isn't as fulfilling, and it can damage relationships. It can create a lot of internal turmoil. There's not a lot of, I've talked a lot about that kind of juicy feeling of the satisfaction of doing something that you enjoy, or being with someone that you enjoy their presence, and the conversations and the experiences that you have, going out into the world and having experiences. We're opening up more and more in our communities, and we really need to get back to that kind of interpersonal relationship that we have, and there can be struggle there. Those can be difficult relationships. It can be hard to get back out into the world. I know a lot of people, including myself, it's a little awkward when you first get started again. You don't know how people are feeling. You don't know what they've been through. You don't know what their experience is. A lot of what has happened in this pandemic, in this current state of society, is a polarization, even more of a polarization than we had before, which I didn't really think about being possible. I already thought that things were kind of polarized when you looked at different aspects of what we're going through every day in our lives, but there even seems to be a more drastic polarization going on. And the purpose and the practice of these activities, of contemplating over these words, of meditating on these concepts, of journaling and writing and learning about yourself, is really to bring yourself back to that middle space, back to that balanced perspective, back to the understanding that there can be opinions on one side, there can be opinions on the other side, but the goal really is to live in that place of balance, to live in that understanding that both of those extremes exist, that it's okay for those extremes to exist, but really for you internally to build activities into your life that strengthen those feelings of balance, of control, of emotional peace of mind, understanding that other people have different perspectives and opinions, and that that's okay, that doesn't have anything to do with you, that your opinions aren't necessarily the right opinions, that your perspective isn't necessarily the only perspective. That's really what we're doing here. We're trying very much to get back into relationships, back into emotional development, back into communication skills, back into the world, and really building ourselves, building that structure of self-confidence in yourself through these activities of self-awareness. And I think that's a really important discussion. It's a really important point for how we're living these days and how we're getting back out into the world as things open up and as we have more social engagement, and just understanding that that's tough. We're all learning right now about how to handle these different things, whether it's an organization or a community or a single person. We're all learning how to navigate this new world that we're in, because it really is different than any of us have experienced. Most of us anyway. It's nothing that I've experienced. It's nothing that people in my close community have experienced. There are people in the world that understand this kind of isolation, that understand this kind of loneliness, that understand this kind of loss. But to experience it as a society, to experience it as a community, is something that I don't think we've done before. And you're either progressing in this place or you're regressing in this place. So this conversation is about taking time to look at the activities in your life that are self-satisfying, that don't produce anything, that don't help you grow or develop, that just kind of waste time, and try to replace some of those things. So look at how many hours a day do I spend doing these things? How many hours a day do I spend just kind of staring at my phone doing nothing, playing little games on my phone, playing video games with people that I don't know, or out in the space where I'm just playing kind of video games, where I'm not building relationships in my life, I'm not building connectedness in my life, I'm not building self-help and personal growth in my life, and try to replace some of that time. So say you do that for 3 hours a day, mindless TV, whatever it is. Say you're doing that for a certain amount of time every day. Try to make an effort to move that to less time. So maybe you spend a half an hour. Maybe you shut off the TV, turn off the video game, put down the phone a half an hour before you go to bed, or a half an hour after you get home from work, or a half an hour of that chunk of time that you spend. And do something else. Do an activity that can help you progress, learn a new skill, fiddle around with an instrument, try a new craft, cook a new meal that takes a little more time, write in your journal, sit and meditate, get a little exercise. Just do something, a small shift in your day, so that you're spending some time building relationships, building yourself, learning a skill, and doing something else that can really grow you as a person. And spend a little less time on those things that just absorb time, that just seem to kind of suck the hours out of the day. And if you can practice on that, it can have a huge benefit. If you do that in a week, if you do a little bit of that every day, you'll find that those things are enjoyable. You'll find that you feel better about it. You're not having some of that internal dialogue about loneliness, or beating yourself up about how many hours you spent doing those activities a day, or how distant you feel, or how much you wish you had another skill that you've always wanted to have. So just move that needle a little bit in that direction of taking care of yourself, of working on something that's bigger than you, working on something that fulfills you, that makes you feel good about yourself, good about the time that you spent. So that's my conversation this week about our word, and I hope that you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear your thoughts and comments and reactions to this, and thank you for showing up today.